Subscribe to this podcast to get exclusive access to the after show Shooting the Breeze. Welcome to the Cool Explorations podcast. Today we will be talking to Dustin Leimgruber. He is an author and he wrote a book called the Sanctus Chronicles, and this is meant to be a series, and in this first book it is called The Plague of Tradium, and you can find Dustin and his book online at www.dpleimgruber.com. So that's www.dpleimgruber.com. Well, welcome to the Cool Explorations podcast. Here we have Dustin Leimgruber. Did I pronounce your name right?
You did. Of all the ways it can be pronounced, you got the correct one.
Perfect. I usually slaughter names, so happy to hear that. So my name is Tony Peters, and I'll be your host today. And we're going to get you, Dustin, just to start out by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you currently do.
Sure. I am a teacher at a classical Christian school, and I'm teaching so many subjects next year. It takes me a while to remember all of them, but I teach chess for 3rd through 8th grade. And then once we hit 7th grade on up, I teach a various and sundry topic with history, religion, formal logic, any kind of culture that you might think of, I'm involved with. So just think of me as humanities and general interest.
Okay. So what does your testimony look like, and what has God been doing in your life lately?
Well, I grew up in the outside Cincinnati area. And so it was pretty rural when I was first there. And my father's side of the family was Catholic and my mother's side was Jewish. So it was a bit of an anomaly out there. And when my parents got together, they had a terrible experience with the church, and they wanted to make sure to protect me from that, especially since I was an only child. And because of an illness of my mother's, there would never be any more. She really never should have been able to survive the pregnancy. And so it was just a miracle that I was born in the first place. So I was very closely guarded, particularly from religious people. And then when I was in kindergarten, I had my first church experience. I went to a French church where I was told that the kids just got to go play outside. And they had an entire sermon about how evil Jews are. So I don't know if there's any Jewish listeners out there, but when you're in a rural area and you're the only Jews in the area, it's a bit of a shock to find out that people get together once a week to talk about you. And so, from that point on, I had kind of a Pauline experience where I just wanted these people to lose their faith because they were such awful people. And I ran into places after that didn't really know what their faith was. They knew that Jesus, and they knew that I was going to hell because I was Jewish. And that was about the entirety of their faith. And this was a real shame because I had a lot of big questions that Christians should have been able to answer. How did we get here? What's our purpose? What about death? Kind of questions. And nobody ever really could answer them, even though I was, arguably in the Bible Belt. So I went all through school, asked lots of people lots of questions, and finally got to my first year of undergraduate, where I joined a Bible study within our varsity and read the Bible for the first time. I had plenty of experiences of just cherry picking pieces of the Bible from people I'd read online just to, look for contradictions in a book that I never intended on reading. But when I read it, I saw that all those big questions that I had were actually there, despite the fact that all the people that I had met that called themselves Christians had a faith that I hated. The faith of the Bible was not that faith. And so I became a Christian in my very first year of school and started doing Bible studies so people could see what the faith was, both for Christians and for non-Christians, and went on to become ordained. And I've been ordained for about 10 years now and did 2 stints in pastoral ministry. And now I'm doing ministry in a classical Christian school, as well as doing some work and writing books for children and adults. And that is where God has me at the moment.
That's a real shame. That the church was so hateful, basically, towards other people, because the Bible is so much about love and showing love to all people, even if we agree with them or disagree with them, loving them no matter what. So that's a real shame that churches were that way, and it's a shame that even today there are churches out there like that they don't really teach biblical foundation. They just kind of go off and do their own thing, and that's not the way Jesus or Paul or Peter, any of these biblical figures would have wanted for us. So I'm glad that you were able to find a group that you were actually able to finally study the Bible and get that foundation with, because that's very important for everybody's life.
It's not just the beginning, but to realize that throughout the Bible, God's people do not behave like they should. And so it's no great shock when something awful comes from people that claim God's name. But you can go back to who God is and find that through the scripture, continue. So that's important at the beginning, middle, and end of a Christian life.
Yeah. And Bible does tell us that there's going to be false teachers and false prophets out there. And so, yeah, we are definitely going to see that, and people are going to be led astray. So in your book, the Sanctus Chronicles, which you just showed us, the first book in the series is the plague of, is it Tradium? Is that how you pronounce that?
Tradium.
Yep. Tradium. Okay. So what's the basic plot of the book, and how did the idea kind of formulate for you?
Well, the basic plot of the book is that you can see the children over here on this side are mysteriously dropped off in this boarding school. And there's been some sort of mysterious disappearance of their parents. And the authorities tell them that the parents have died, but none of them actually saw it. So they still don't know exactly what's happened. And in this boarding school, it is supposed to be a magical boarding school where they're being taught how to do magic. And they still go through all of the traditions, and they still learn how to write these things out, and they still have classes that you would think would be teaching them. But the teachers aren't really interested in the students learning. They just want things to be the way that they've always been for no apparent purpose. And as things go along, one of the main characters, the eldest child, mysteriously finds a book. And as he's reading this book, he finds out about all different kinds of stories that have some kind of link to a mysterious ram. And as he's reading the book and going through the story of the school and what's happening to him, he comes upon all these difficulties with the professors, whether he chooses to do what is right or what the professors tell him to do. So you might see some autobiographical themes going along there of what's going on in the book. The way that I wrote the book is that right at the very beginning of Corona, so this was the turn right into 2020, I was going to be going out of the country for a while with one of my children. And that would mean that I wouldn't be able to read a bedtime story to the others. And reading's a big cultural thing in our family. And I wanted to make sure that everybody could still be on the same page. And so I decided I would write a bedtime story for them. And there would be a chapter for every night that we would be gone. So when I was away with the eldest, I could read him the story in the time zone we were in. And then my wife could read to all the other kids that same chapter in the time zone they were in. And so if we could communicate throughout that day, they could at least talk about the book that they had been read. And as they were going along, they eventually figured out that they were the characters in this book, that I had taken each of their middle names and made that the first name of the character. And they had been transported to the school, and they were the ones faced with these choices and these difficult professors. And they could see what happened as they were put into that situation.
That's really cool, actually. That's a really interesting idea. It's always interesting where where the backstories behind a lot of books are, because I'm an author myself, so that really just interests me.
That's great.
What was the writing process like for you? Like, how did that all flow and go along and come onto paper?
Yeah, I am a combination of a planner where I have an idea that I'm trying to get to by the end of it, but also stopping in the moment and saying, I know this is where I was going, but that's not what this character would do. Or, oh, here's this thing that they would discover. And so I'd go off in those little directions like that. And so the writing comes fairly naturally. There is a poem in there that's a big 40 stanza poem, which I enjoy quite a bit. And I had my students last year memorize as part of school. And we went through and analyzed both the mechanics of the poem and what it was doing in the culture of the book and where it came from with other literary sources and that sort of thing. And that was a great deal of fun. But a poem like that only took about 2 hours to write. And so the writing process itself is very quick. I am a terrible editor. And so that process took much longer than the writing. and then going around and figuring out, what it looks like to try to find an agent or publishing house. That took a long time until I finally decided to just put it out independently, because most of the literature that is being targeted to the middle grade audience is either highly inappropriate for said audience. A lot of people are soliciting like queer romance novels for 8-year-olds was one of the things that I found was a common theme. Or they're looking for really dumbed down language. They want something that's almost C spot run for the 8-year-old audience. And I wanted something that was an elevated morality as well as vocabulary that parents could sit down and read with their kids, and would be a book that you could pick up when you were, 6 or 7 years old if you were listening to it with your family, or you could appreciate as an adult. And there's just not really a niche for that in the current publishing world. So I decided to do it independently after that time.
Yeah, and definitely that's what we see in schools. And I've seen a few books that are targeted to the young adults as well, and mid-teens that are very inappropriate. And there was a big thing about one book got banned from schools, and I'm like, well, it was outright had sexual stuff in it, so it should be banned in schools. But there was a big uproar in the media because it was a ban from schools, and it's like, well, schools actually did something right for once lately, because there's a lot of schools that aren't doing things right now.
Yeah, it's rare to get news where you hear that a school is doing something right for their students.
Yeah. So when do you expect to put the next installment in this series out?
When I pick up writing again, I've been taking a summer to get the house straight and spend some time outside, but hopefully I start writing here in the next month or two. It'll probably take about a year to get that second book out. And I'm sure that the writing process will look a little bit different than it did in the first year, but at least now I'm down on knowing that I'm publishing independently, and I've already got my structure and ideas for the second book. And so maybe it'll take less than a year if I'm being optimistic, but my guess is I'll have it out in another year.
Cool. So how have you tied the Christian faith into the whole book? Like, I know it's underlying in a lot of the different places. Can you just explain that for those who haven't read the book?
Sure. One of the things that I relied on heavily is I've read the large majority of what C.S. Lewis has put out. The one that's really popular that he does is the Chronicles of Narnia, and he also does the Space Trilogy, if you want to look at a similar style, but just in a different genre of sci-fi. And the way that he goes about it is that he creates an alternate universe, and that he puts God into that universe and just asks the question, what would happen? And so it's the same character of God. And so if you look at the Chronicles of Narnia, Aslan is God. He's just in this alternate universe. And so what would that God do? Well, he wouldn't die on a cross in that universe, but he would die on a stone table. And it creates that same idea of, here we see a sinner, and this God comes and he dies for the sinner, and we're playing out those themes. And so I do a similar thing in the Sanctus Chronicles, where I have a figure that is God placed in this alternate universe, and we see what would happen. Now, the first book is shadowing, and I wanted to do something where you just had a types and figures first book, where you don't just come right out and say at the very beginning, hey, everybody, here's this God figure, and let's watch what he does. The students find themselves in a world which is complicated and confusing, and this God kind of pokes his head in every once in a while. And they don't know him as God yet, but they do see his goodness. They see the goodness of him in these books, and they're starting to be guided along the way. And so for that, I took inspiration from Esther, where you never see God named outright, but you do see him controlling all of these facts as you go along and pushing the characters in the direction that they'll need to go. So book 2 will be much more explicit when they start to understand who this is, and they get into kind of the theology of this God figure. But they'll still have to understand, well, how does he play into this world? And why isn't it perfect yet now that we understand? And all different kinds of things that I don't think I can spoil a book I haven't written yet, but it'll start like that in the second book.
So where do people go to find you and your book online, or where can they purchase the book?
You can go to my website, dpleimgruber.com, and there's links there. and I get a small commission off of the affiliate fee. So that one gives me a couple extra cents. If you can't remember how to spell Leimgruber and you don't want to go to dpleimgruber.com, just go to Amazon and look up the Sanctus Chronicles. It'll look like this. I have it in all the formats. I've got it ebook, softcover, hardcover, as well as audiobook, because I do the large majority of my reading via audiobook, and it's narrated by the author.
I did a brief intro before as well, where I spelled it out for people so they can actually find it without worrying about the spelling.
Okay.
And I'll put a link as well in the description for everybody. And switching gears, what is it like being a teacher in today's society? I know you teach in a Christian school, but just in general, as a teacher, what's it like?
I love teaching. I have always been an educator at heart. And one of the nice things about teaching, specifically in a classical Christian school, is that you have a lot of students whose parents value education, or else they wouldn't be sending them to a private school. So that's already a cultural influence coming from home, where you're not fighting the kids as much to want to learn. You get to look at the very best of culture from history, and you are putting it all into a Christian worldview. And being able to do that with students who are largely joyful, and being able to be the one who shares it with them, is a joyful experience. So it doesn't matter what subject we're looking at. The question is always, what does this say about God? What does this say about us? What was good about this culture? What is redeemable? What is wicked about this for us to avoid? And in everything, I'm able to disciple these students. I love being able to do that in an all-day classroom where you are looking at all these different aspects of life, because a lot of our discipleship looks very small in comparison to education. Even if somebody is a regular churchgoer and I say, well, I'm in church every single week and I'm there for, Sunday school and the service, that's about 2 hours of catechesis per week, where you were telling yourself, okay, these are the things that I should be paying attention to. And if we were to do anything in the world for just 2 hours a week, we wouldn't even be called a fan of that thing. If you talk to somebody who's a sports fan and they only spend 2 hours a week thinking about that sport or that team, you'd say, okay, well, you're kind of a casual follower of that. But, the people who really get into it, they're, paying attention to the draft and, looking at the injury report and watching all the games, the post analysis and all the rest of it. And so if we try to do that with our Christian faith, we just get that little 1 or 2 hours in per week. It's difficult to really be a disciple. But when I get to be with kids for the majority of their day, if you don't count their sleeping hours, it's just a joy to be able to form people in that way so they can see who God is and how that affects them.
Yeah, that's very important. And I think it's a shame a lot of what's going on in our secular schools, where it's the things that are being shoved down our children's throats is quite appalling. So I appreciate Christian schools and what they do, and I wish more people could have access to Christian schools and be able to afford that, because I think it's important that our kids get that foundation early on.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the wonderful things about this school that I get to teach at. It's Three Oaks Christian School in Decatur, Indiana. And they have a scholarship plan where a family would never pay more than 10% of what they make to send their whole family to school. And particularly if you've got a lot of kids, you would never be able to afford a private school with all those kids. But if you say, okay, we're willing to put up 10% of what we make for a children's education, then you can be partnering with the school and discipling your children. Now, my parents had an enormous amount of sacrifice to send me to a private school. It wasn't a Christian school, but it was a private school. And I was an only child, so for them to be able to pay that kind of money for just one kid was a big deal. Imagine when you've got more than one kid, if you want that kind of education. So it is an investment, but it shows your kids what's really worth it in this world. That if you are getting a more modest house because you want to educate them in the faith, they learn, oh, this is the most important thing in my life. And when I grow up, if I have to choose between a new car or sending my kids to a good school, then I'll choose education.
Yeah, and I think that's important, because our children are the next generation, and they're aside from God, they should be the most important thing in our life. And getting that priority straight is very, very important. If you could give one piece of advice for young writers out there who are looking to either try and get published or just start writing in general, what advice would you give them?
I'll answer the second half first. If you are looking to get published, look independent first. There's just lots of platforms out there that will let you publish for free. I use Amazon. You upload it on there. You have to do all the work as far as advertising goes, but you don't have somebody standing over your shoulder saying, oh, you're not allowed to say that. As far as writing goes, the first thing is just to read quality books, because you are forming yourself to say what is good literature, and you will be influenced by those things. It might not be that you're saying, oh, I'm going to use this exact book's theme to do, fan fiction or be very much like it. But the way that characters are written, the way that you see societies portrayed, seeing what a good villain is, all those sorts of things come from reading excellent books. And so when I talk about the Sanctus Chronicles with people, I can tell the people who have read those good books, because somebody said, oh, I just finished Fahrenheit 451, and this one reminds me of Beatty. So, oh, that's great. You're the first one to pick that up. And if somebody's read that, they say, oh, yeah, you kind of did a little Beatty in that book. And somebody who hasn't read the book just says, oh, man, that villain was great. I still don't know what to think of him. It still makes for good writing because you're putting in good things. So just keep reading good books to influence the way that you write them.
Yeah, that's very, very important. Well, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciated it. It's been
having me on your show.
Yeah. When your next book comes out, just give me a shout and we'll have you back on to discuss that too.
All right, awesome.
Thank you for listening to the Cool Explorations podcast. You've just been listening to author Dustin Leimgruber, and you can find him at www.dpleimgruber.com. That is www.dpleimgruber.com. Well, I have just been blessed with so many people who are requesting to be on the show, and I'm impressed with how many people want to share their testimonies or what they're doing for the Lord right now. If I haven't got back to you, I promise I will get back to you. I look forward to speaking with each of you and interviewing you, and keep tuning into the show. There's lots of new people that are coming on here, and if you're considering wanting to come on the show, just shoot me an email at tpeters745@gmail.com, and I will get back to you.